subscribe. I've been trying to get TJ Katherineberg onto the show for like donkey's years now. I
Yes.
finally did it. Well, I think TJ, I finally arranged my schedule better. So welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on.
It's no, look, it's my pleasure. Ever since I featured you guys in the past, well, you do great work out there in Phoenix, Arizona. And then I found you by happenstance and I've been watching you from afar. And I'm like, man, I got to talk to this guy. So it's my thrill. I'm sure you're going to enlighten everyone worldwide with your stuff. But before then, tell us about you, please.
Yeah, I mean, I got into coaching about 4 or 5 years ago. I came from the route that I think a lot of people come from. I was a player first. Wanted to play professionally. That was the first dream, and then kind of figured out along the way that I had a skill for uh, relaying information to people, getting them to understand it pretty well. I'm fairly articulate, so I went for the coaching route, and that's kind of what I went hard into ever since. So still love to play the game, but yeah, started with elite golf schools maybe 2, 3 years ago. That's
Yeah.
where I currently am at.
And listening to you and your depth of knowledge, this stuff doesn't happen by accident. I've been teaching golf since 96, I think it is, probably when you were born.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Read
Your guys'
voracious, I've read voraciously. You're making me feel old. And I've watched videos and I'm still watching videos and I'm still learning. But your level of understanding when it comes to biomechanics and then just playing the game also, and then sort of coming up with drills and feels and stuff out of this is incredible. So I'd love to know if there was like a mentor or an influence on you as a young instructor.
Yeah, I've had a few mentors now that have really kind of walked me down the path. I mean, the first one was probably Riley Andrews, and you've had him on the podcast before. Um, main head guy at elite golf schools, and um, another mentor name is Luke Brackey,
Yeah.
and he kind of helped us understand some of the biomechanics stuff, some of the fascial line stuff, which is really interesting to work through. In the past couple years, I've had, a couple even more mentors, like people very just forthright with their time and their information, and very grateful for them. One's JT Thomas. I don't know if you've ever seen his stuff or,
I know him.
um,
Hmm.
yeah, he's really cool. And then recently, Alex Moore, who's been helping me with my own game, and I've been playing better again. So yeah, lots of mentors, really.
Hmm. For the informed golfer, and we've got hundreds of thousands that watch and listen to this. And I'm kind of one of those, and I'm trying to refine my game again here. Um,
Mhm.
I am a myriad of swing thoughts that
Yeah.
change almost by the minutes, sadly, at times. And you're very informed and you're a smart young man, and now you got someone helping you with your game too. Help us a little bit when it comes to kind of sticking to one thing, because it's so easy to bounce around between concepts, especially if you know a little bit more than most.
Right. That's a huge challenge. That's the main challenge I think coaches have that also are interested in playing
Hmm.
is being able to let go of all the information that you know and go play the game again. And that's really what, working with Alex Moore, that's the main thing he's helped me to do is um, practices and things that help me get out of my own head, get out of my own way, and get me to playing the game freely again. Um, a lot of that is like changing my concept of when I'm thinking out
Okay.
there. More so to like thinking before I approach the shot, how I'm going to set up to it, what type of shot I want to hit, and then kind of letting the swing happen.
All right.
Um, Obviously, there's swing stuff you need to nail, but that's kind of how you play the game, I think.
Are you a big one for like having a swing thought or one other feel that you're striving for? Do you get out there and like see a shot and then just try and play curves and spin?
For me, see a shot and play curves and spin, but I know you can do it a lot of different ways. A lot of different ways.
All right, cool. All right. Speaking of swing thoughts, let's dive in. I'd
Sure.
said to you before we went hot that of late year, a lot of these podcasts have been kind of ethereal, lots of breathing and hypnotism and sports psychology and such. But your feed on Instagram is just loaded with information. And so there's a mixture between drills and insights and stuff. And I looked through this and I'm like, let's pick some things that will really help to flush the ball. Because you got a hashtag that says hit more flushers. Hashtag hit
Sure.
more flushers. So let's help people flush. So I'm going to pitch these things at you, allow you to explain, sort of create conversation. If you want to demonstrate, feel free, folks. You can go and watch this on YouTube as well. If you're driving in a car, please be careful. Okay, I just had to say that. Um, there's so much that's misunderstood about turns and tilts. And now, as vernacular gets better in golf, I find we run the risk of being almost too granular, maybe too jargon knees kind of thing. And so you got all
Sure.
this stuff, but you did a beautiful explanation or showed about just how to get the proper load in the swing. And it was a drill that you did basically against a wall with a club rested across your shoulders. So please describe that. And then I guess in so doing, you're going to talk about how the body turns on a tilt to be able to land that club consistently.
Yeah, yeah. And I'd love to demonstrate too, like you said,
Oh, yeah.
if
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, so that wall drill, right? So the main purpose of that wall drill, when I see people worried about tilts, a lot of times they're losing the space between themselves and the golf ball as they tilt.
Right.
So you'll see a lot of people as they learn how to tilt, they're getting their lead shoulder down, their right trail shoulder up, but in a way where they kind of dive out towards the golf ball
Yeah.
and lose their space, right? So at that point, they're kind of stuck and they have to gain some space away from the golf ball on their way back through. And you get a lot of early extension. You get a lot of poor things that come from that, right?
Yeah.
So
You've dropped the magic words because I think if golf instruction nowadays on the internet, early extension is like a buzz phrase. And
it
for the
is.
folks who were listening to this, what TJ showed us was he was looking at the camera basically. So we're looking down his line and he turned. And as he turned back, the upper body started to droop. Almost TJ like trying to keep your head down, like a lot of club golfers are trying to do. So he's losing his shape, he's losing his height. Now from there, he turns into a big backhoe unless he backs out of this thing to create space. Right.
Correct.
So you've shown us now. I thought the concept of the keeping maintaining the space was so cool. So show us how you do it.
Yeah. So, if you've got that wall in front of you, and you can do this at home, if you get your head kind of right up against a wall,
Mm-hmm.
essentially put your club over your chest, kind of even on both sides, club head and grip on one side.
Yeah.
And as you move away from the golf ball, we're trying to both turn and tilt, right? There's two things happening at once, but we want to do so in a way where we maintain the space between ourselves and the golf ball as we do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had this grip on my lead side of my body and I had this wall somewhere over here, I'm trying to turn and tilt, yet stay away from the wall as I do so.
Yeah.
And that gets the spacing right, gets the player able to, drop back in transition, actually cover the ball instead of extend immediately.
I can see people trying this already. Guys in the office, guys and girls in the office. Um, I'm expecting a lot of folks are going to feel like, whoa, I'm a long way from the ball now. Um,
100%.
yeah, which think about how many golfers are kind of handcuffing themselves because they're getting too close to it. Where if it was
Mhm.
any sport, they'd be giving themselves room to maneuver.
There you go. Yes, absolutely. Space is huge. Especially if you're gonna generate speed and the club head shooting out away from the body at some point,
Mhm.
you got to have the space for that to occur. Otherwise, you're gonna hit some shanks, hosel rockets, all that stuff nobody likes to see, right?
Yeah, and the cool thing about this drill, folks, if you go and look at his TJ's Instagram feed, if you're losing height, you're going to bump your head against the wall. If your shoulders are turning too level, you're going to run the grip handle into the wall. So it's basically giving you just, the spatial kind of wiggle room to figure out where you got to maneuver to create space, yet still load up properly. Because when you get into that sort of raised, tilted phase, that's when you're really engaging everything physically. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's when you're using the spiral line, right? Which is you've seen us talk about that a little bit probably on our feeds, right? And the spiral line's a cool way of kind of visualizing both turn and tilt. So
Mhm.
both a vertical and a horizontal component to it. And you'll feel that, like as you're doing this, you'll feel kind of a stretch start to happen. Usually people feel it right across this right side of their rib cage here. It kind of expands a little bit.
Mhm.
It might feel a little crunch in here, but obviously main purpose there is just creating the space and staying away from it.
Awesome. All right, that's one. We've got a few. Building into that, because now we've got a nice spacious backswing with big width and lots of load. Now transitioning that stuff and getting it back down to the ball.
Sure.
Golly. I've spoken with many legends. Tom Watson has said it to me multiple times, and he gets these icy blue eyes and he looks straight through you. And he's like, the transition is the most important time in the golf swing. And I'm like, yes, sir. And you did this beautiful video of just the arm load drill and how the body and the torso move relative to the leading arm. So show us and describe us, please.
Sure. Yeah. So the lead arm is a cool one because there's a lot of you can feel tension really well across this whole lead arm line. So a lot of people when they're swinging, they feel tension in their lead arm very, very early on in their backswing.
Yeah.
So they'll tend to rake the lead arm across their body, adduct, stretch early, where this lead arm kind of gets really low and across them, and then go ahead.
No, okay. For the folks listening, TJ's in his posture now. He's swinging back. His lead arm just swings straight across him. Folks, all of you that have read somewhere or watched a video on YouTube and it's talking about lead arm depth, a lot of you are overdoing it, and TJ is helping you to fix this right now. So keep going. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So definitely, I see it overdone quite a lot. And if you manage the tension in this lead arm, if it's really, really early, that you start to feel this upper arm get really, really tense and stretched out.
Okay.
Well, the arm kind of acts as a rubber band. So that's the analogy that we use. So if it stretches out, it wants to snap back. So if I stretch it across my body early, it wants to snap back in a way that generally is over the plane and again is going to produce some manipulations and compensations through the strike.
Yeah.
So when we're kind of talking about this lead arm load drill, I want to get my rib cage moving almost away from the lead arm initially, creating space so that in transition, I can get that rubber band to load up and across my body so that the release of that is at the appropriate time, right? It's through the ball rather than early, essentially.
Yeah, in your video, you did a beautiful job and you talked about, to start the backswing, it's almost like the rib cage was moving and the arm then connected with it. And then in transition, the rib cage was moving and the arm kind of got pulled a little bit by it, or reconnected, let me say, or pulled by it. And I think that's so cool too, because then you watch golfers too, and they're all disconnected all over the show, and then they got a towel under their arms, and they're kind of losing the athleticism and the dynamics of it all. Yet your description here, if the torso begins to move, you get this feeling where there is that snap, that elasticity to the arm delivery and transition.
Right, which is to me what you're seeing with players that want to bomb it. They want to hit it further. Well, they're using some of these elements. They're using the elasticity, the stretch, the load. There is a part of the game that is more, I want to get the ball close to the hole. I need to be precise, right? And sometimes that can lead itself to more connection or the towel drill or things like that, right? But it's kind of understanding what it is we're trying to do. And if a player can't compress the ball very well, they can't flush it, like you said, right? They may need some of this stuff to open up their athleticism a little bit.
Yeah, hit more flushes. I'm going to keep on saying it. I'm writing it down on my notepad right now.
Yeah.
Folks, if you want to see it, you can just go to TJ's Instagram handle. It is at TJK Golf 17. Okay, the stacking of the lead side and transition, and what you kind of see I'm doing here is I've kind of gone, all right, loading properly, transitioning, and this is another transition thing. And you talked about kind of stacking the joints on top of each other as you go from backswing to downswing. A lot of folks describe it like you're skiing downhill or something to that kind of effect. Show it, describe it, talk about the value of it, because I feel like most golfers are either backing away, they too much upper body, and they really don't nail this transition as well as what Mr. Tom Watson would like them to.
Yeah, I got to hear more about the Tom Watson. You have to talk to me about that a little bit. All right. Um, so yeah, stacking the lead joints in transition. So this kind of builds in, and you and I were talking about this before we started as well. This idea of the chi line, right?
Yeah,
From
exactly.
classic kind of Kelvin Miyahira blogs, if any of you have ever seen those. Um, essentially, like we can utilize a line of these lead joints, my lead shoulder, hip, knee, foot, as a way of making sure that we've appropriately gotten up to our left side or our lead side in transition.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see people kind of lose this in a few different ways, right? You'll see the crowd that thinks that they need to rotate really hard. So they'll rotate really hard from the top, kind of leave their butt back
Yes.
away from the target.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've kind of lost that stack. I have too much of this like forward lean or bend, and I can't get the ball in the air very well. So that's kind of one way that people lose it.
You're leaking
And then
speed
the
that way
other
too.
way, what's that?
You're leaking speed in the biggest way that way as well. Okay.
For sure. Yeah, you can't speed up the club very well there. And then the other way that I see people, they kind of overdo it in the other direction is they'll get the lead hip, basically the hips in general, the pelvis, sliding overly laterally in transition, leaving their head and middle of their torso back away from the target.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have a lot of issues with like bottom out control. I might have to flip the face at it quite a lot. So finding that kind of stacked motion, right? That kind of builds into that lead arm stretch too.
Mm-hmm.
If I got my lead arm stretching up and across my chest as my rib cage starts to kind of sway away from where the lead arm is stretching to,
Yeah.
I get this sensation of all of my joints stack right in line with another in transition. So I got the head, the shoulder, lead, hip, knee, foot. If I can get to that type of a position or an idea, then I can more easily turn and pivot around through the strike in a way that's both speedy and efficient from a biomechanical perspective.
Audio listeners, TJ showed beautifully there how as the lead arm was going back, the upper body was sort of shifting, and he got the shoulder over the hip, over the knee, over the forward ankle. Help us, because I can see a number of golfers going, okay, I don't do this. I'm, the junior golfer, the high school hooker, where the hips shoot out from underneath them, they all tilt and they flick. And then you see
Yeah.
the other golfer who's the big over the top upper body early. And then they get the stuff, and then they start to go too long in this inclination. Because obviously the timing of going, okay, I've hit the spot, now start to rotate and push up.
Mm.
When is that magical moment? I mean, when do we stop going down until those joints stack?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay. So I like the image of the ski jump that you brought up early
Mm-hmm.
and kind of feeling that out for the player, right? Because if I just keep going down that ski jump forever, then I lose this ability to properly extend and lift up into the finish,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's a way of sort of building acceleration, building this load and stretch to a point where eventually we want to ride right back up that ski jump,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think you could also build space into this idea of understanding what's too much,
Yeah.
right? Because if I'm really trying to stack those lead joints and I'm doing so in a way where I really kind of crash everything down towards the golf ball, well, I've lost the space again. I've lost the space between my chest and the ball, and I'm going to have to really, really stand back up out of it.
This is a really big case, I guess, too, now that I think about it, and you show us for, because the good golfer error, most golfer error is to put the ball too far back in their stance to guarantee that they hit ball before ground. So
Yes,
I guess what you're talking about here, this is a case for moving that ball forward.
yes,
If the forward, you
absolutely.
have the mandate to be able to do this, yet still be behind the ball to really release the speed of the club at the right time.
100%. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah. The back ball position thing, it's kind of a band-aid for a lot of people. It encourages them to stay in their current movement patterns instead of maybe make a little bit more efficient move if you just kind of move that ball up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's another nod to Tom Watson here. One of his mentors was Byron Nelson.
Mm.
And Byron had two things. He goes, you can never stand too close to the ball, and you can never have the ball too far forward in your stance. You proven that, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
proven that right now. Um, the along these lines too, and I'm sort of going in one place because again, folks, TJ and I want you to flush it. So that means landing the club at the right place in relation to the golf ball, having the face squared off, speed at the right time. The stretch sequence of the lead arm. I thought your description thereof was fascinating as well. And, obviously it moves in relation to the torso, but you talked about how that lead arm works throughout the golf swing and, how the thing moves in relation to your body. So talk about that a little bit, please.
Sure. So there's a number of different ways that people can stretch out the lead arm based on matchups and things that they're trying to do down at the bottom. I'll say that first. So um, I'll give kind of a general idea of like middle preferences,
All
like
right.
where someone would find themselves in the middle. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, we've already talked about like we don't really want to stretch it across the body super early, right? We'd like to delay that a little bit so that that stretch starts to happen in transition,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And when that stretch happens in transition, generally, if I really, really want to load it up, I want to kind of maximize the load, if you will. The arm is both going to lift and move across the body. So when people want depth, that's kind of what they're after is like this sensation here, where the lead arm starts to really, really stretch out. We'd call that a little bit of internal rotation as well
Yeah.
as you get up to the top, which helps this right arm kind of fit under the left arm, right? And kind of loads everything up in a way that the club face is generally going to be pretty balanced and I can sling it through the strike.
I guess ostensibly it's sort of stretching against its support mechanism in the body too. And for most folks who collapse and overswing at the top, as you going back and the arms are kind of stretching as far as we can, they're working against the body going in the opposite direction. Yes.
Right. And that's another way that you can feel the stretch. So a lot of people, when they're focused on this arm stuff, they lose their sense of like where the body should be moving in space.
Yeah.
And they'll really start trying to make a big stretch away from the target and they'll kind of start swaying and moving away from the target. Um, so the rib cage sort of opposing that direction that the lead arm is stretching. So by getting the rib cage to kind of oppose that and start to move in the opposite direction, that creates a bigger stretch, if you will, without having to do it all in the arms. Like it kind of leaks down into the chest as well.
Yeah. Folks, if you've been watching the internet, another big buzzword right now is recentering in the backswing.
Mm.
What you're talking about here is that little movement to the right, but then the torso recentering to make it easier to land that club in the right place.
100%. Yeah. If you're going to move lateral off the ball, which people debate whether you should do that or not, right? But if you're going to move a little lateral off the ball, you've got to be good at recentering. You got to have good rhythm, good body dynamics so that you can get back over to your left side, stack those joints in transition.
Okay, let's go there because you touched on it. I have my
Sure.
ideas. I'm not a stack and tilter by any stretch, but I certainly
Right.
understand and I know that too many golfers travel laterally too long in their backswing in an effort to get behind the ball or make a bigger backswing. So where do
Right.
you sit theoretically on the lateral movement in relation to the pivot going back?
Um,
Or is it a case by case basis as you can offer me?
it's for sure a case by case basis based on the player I'm coaching in front of me, right? Like what do they want? So I don't mind the stack and tilt system actually. Like I like some of the ideas. I like how they're getting people to stop swaying so much off the golf ball because that is just a huge problem, right? With high handicappers.
Yeah.
Now, if a player comes to me and he says, TJ, I want to bomb it. Like I want to hit it further, right? Well, I'm probably not going to coach them to stay completely on their lead side if they're going to bomb it. I'm going to let them kind of load up into their right a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes when they do that, they can actually move back to their left side more efficiently
Okay.
if they load up into that right side correctly. But it is kind of fickle. Like people really don't know how to load up into that right side in a way that can bounce them back to the lead side. They just end up staying over there forever.
Well, the beauty about it, folks, is your host who knows a little bit about this stuff. All these things we've talked about will kind of organize you in relation to the golf ball going back pretty well. I mean, and I guess with what we're showing you, there's going to be a little less lateral going on with these drills we've talked about or the concepts.
Yeah, I think if you balance out these forces correctly, so you balance out the lead arm stretch, but you also balance it out with the rib cage starting to move laterally in transition, you get kind of a look that you just look fairly centered throughout
Exactly.
the swing.
Love it.
Um, so not a lot of lateral. Yeah.
And for those of you that get criticized by your playing competitors where they like you moving your head around the place too much, you'll start to stabilize your head if you do what TJ says as well. I nearly called you Riley.
It's all right.
All right, this is a biggie. You sort of touched on it some already with the wall drill, but the pelvic tilts over just the level spinning because so many golfers they hear, well, you don't turn enough. So the next thing they're turning completely horizontally, and there's
Mhm.
just nothing to them, and they're finding it so hard to land the club in the right place.
Yeah. So pelvic tilts are cool. It's a way of generating a little bit more speed
Mm-hmm.
as well. I'd call it generating a little bit more like vertical force, so like up and down movement.
Right.
And that balances really, really well with an arm line load that we've kind of talked about, like this arm stretch.
Yeah.
So if I get this arm kind of stretching like vertical and across my body here as I finish the backswing,
Mm-hmm.
some might call that a shallowing force to the golf club that I'm applying to my lead arm essentially,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So if I'm not really good at sort of maintaining the proper pelvic tilt, then I have a situation going on where I end up popping out of my posture, kind of losing my tilts
Mm-hmm.
in a way where I'm probably going to have to fix that back coming down. And I've lost all of the good stuff that I've gotten from stretching out the arm line to begin with.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, no, no. I was just going to add to that too. Look, I guess the goal to all of this is to get the club back down to the ball. So if that
Mhm.
happens, then so many folks just start to collapse across their upper body and their neck, and there's
Yes.
no rotation to them. And then their teacher, their pros, like, you're not rotating your chest through the golf ball. And then the next thing,
Yeah.
they're adding movement to a dead situation, and the whole thing just, I can see you rolling your eyes. So
Yeah.
I want you to address, the movement of the hinging, let's use a bad word, of that area across the pelvis there, because every great golfer does this. And do you remember how many people criticized Tiger Woods when he came out for doing that? How they're like, he's losing too much height in his golf swing. Yet the guy hit
Right.
past everybody and he was built like a broomstick.
Yeah. He smoked it.
Yeah,
Smoked it. Um,
about that.
so yeah, okay, I'll talk about that a little bit. So we're creating like a pelvic tilt. Mostly that's going to be kind of a transition look. And if we use the kind of ski jump as the example, right? It's a move that helps me gain a little bit of acceleration as I come down the ski jump,
Okay, right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm starting to stretch that lead arm up and across my chest in transition, I want the rib cage and the pelvis to kind of stretch on this down angle, this at a down and call it a 30 to 45-degree angle, somewhere around there, right?
Right. Yeah.
So at this angle where now I can start to ride right back down that ski jump before I come back out and up on the other side,
Uh-huh.
right? So if I have very, very level hips as I do this, and I kind of come out of my tilts, I lose the ability to coast down the ski jump,
Exactly.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I like thinking about this in terms of like trajectory control. As if you're a better player out there and you're thinking about like what the ball's doing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In transition, you're like preparing your body to hit a really low trajectory shot.
Yeah, I
So
love it.
you're preparing your body to kind of tilt down here
Mm-hmm.
before you explode back up, and the balance of those two forces creates kind of a middle trajectory.
Love it. Hey, I got to ask this. My youngest daughter's, not eldest daughter, I should say, is a candidate here. Hip weakness, weakness across the hips and stuff. that will kind of scuttle our ability to do this. So, having strength across that area, you're going to be fighting a losing battle if you're not, if the hip flexes, I should say, are tight and so on. Yes.
Yes, and I'd say the vast majority of people have very tight hip flexors,
Yeah.
right? Me too.
Mhm.
Um, it's actually something I work through on a daily basis. Like I'm trying to keep them open, keep them loose, right? But
Yeah.
they're one of the hardest areas to keep open and loose. So you could imagine the guy that works the 9 to 5 job and is sitting at a desk all day. Well, he may have some issue creating some of that pelvic tilt.
Yeah.
So there could be some workouts and stretches that he can do to kind of open that area up. But there's also a matchup for every single player. I don't feel like you have to fit into the model exactly.
But well, I appreciate you saying that because I do believe that. But I would almost say too that I'm almost led to kind of start a movement here alongside you if you're keen to join me, where folks with limited time, businessmen, women, students being at school the whole day, don't just get to the range and just start swinging. Go in the locker room and just stretch across your hips and do whatever just for 5 6 minutes. You're going to set yourself on a good starting point.
That would make such a massive difference. Literally just 5 minutes. Just go in, like you said, clubhouse. You can do it on the range if you don't care if people are looking at you. I don't care. I just do it. Like get open and let's go.
Yeah, right. Cool. We have got lots of podcasts and that stuff. Go and look for them, and I'm getting some more guests on soon. Um, Dragging the handle draggers. Golly, I was
Yeah.
one. Because you know what?
Yeah.
Here's my, from when I was a young man, I told you I learned from reading books. One of them was The Modern Fundamentals by Ben Hogan. And
Mhm.
there's that image of a really strong man over there, and he's got these big muscles, and he's pulling, and the club's behind him. And this is what Hogan was feeling. He didn't look anything like it. And I
Right.
was like, well, I got to do this. And I became a candidate to miss everything weak and to the right for the rest of my playing career, unless I
Yes.
got really loose handed. Um, Talk about the handle pullers, because I feel like most golfers probably fall into this category.
Yeah. So the handle pullers, it's like one side of the coin of proper golf swing dynamics. I mean, I can kind of drag the handle a little bit, maybe apply a little bit of lag pressure to the club, get it sort of feeling like it's bending back behind me a little bit in transition, which is a valuable asset to speed,
Yes.
right? So see a lot of the speediest players doing things like that. But what you saw with Hogan was not only did he really leverage the club back behind him, but it was out into the ball by the time impact was there, like phenomenally. So
Mhm.
not only did he load up the lag pressure, but he got rid of it
Yeah.
phenomenally. That's power and speed, right? So a lot of people chasing shaft lean, chasing compression of the golf ball,
Hmm.
they sometimes take it too far to where they just drag the handle what kind of feels like forever, and they
Yeah.
never let the club head actually release or get out away from them. So there's a blend of those two things that needs to happen. If you're going to go the lag route, you got to learn how to get the lag out as well.
I think a lot of folks too, they sort of pull the handle down in front of them too long, and they don't understand that the actual pulling force on the handle, just
Yes.
like the shift, is done and not even a third into the downswing. And from the rest of the time, you're trying to get the head back through the ball. You care to elaborate there?
100%. And that kind of that where that release happens changes based on the shot being hit, the club being hit.
Mhm.
Um, so you can kind of get away with some of the handle draggy stuff with like wedges and short irons,
Yeah.
but you can't get away with it as you start working your way up to the bag, long irons, driver, things like that. So
Mhm.
you're 100% right. Like when I'm hitting a driver, I feel as if I'm getting the club out or releasing it
Mhm.
almost immediately starting the downswing, right? I'm starting to get that club head moving back out away from me, which
Yeah.
is kind of anti-drag in a way, right?
Well, I think there's a case for it because I'll throw a few names at you. How about Louis Oosthuizen? I know because I've taught him back in the day. I mean,
Oh, okay.
everyone's enviable of this dude's golf swing. It's like he's throwing the club head at the golf ball.
Yeah.
He sort of stands up, but he's got a bad back, so the two kind of counter each other, and he matches up the way you say. But everyone would love to swing the thing like Louis just because of the rhythm and the power he creates for a small guy, because he's letting that club head sling out there and he's not pulling the handle all the way around him.
I mean, to quote a cliche, right? He's like letting the club do the work,
Yeah, exactly.
right? He's not so worried about, I got to rev my engine for so long and hard before I actually let the club go. Like you can let it go if you're a handle puller, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing too. Everything that you've talked about earlier with, the stacking the lead side and all these ideas of the rib cage kind of pulling and the arm connecting with that. If you're doing that stuff, you can't really sling the head too early. I know that's a big statement, but but
No, it's not.
but
I'm agreeing with you.
kind of on
So
board. You're on board there, right?
I'm completely on board. You'll see a lot of the greats across time. I mean, there's one Jack Nicklaus clip that always stands out to me that he goes, I can't release the club too early as long as I move to my left side, right? Which kind of similar stuff that we're talking about here. Like if I can get my dynamics moving left early enough, then I can throw that club what kind of feels like down behind the golf ball. Scotty Scheffler does that
Mhm.
probably the most of anyone today,
Yeah.
right?
And some of that handle dragging too. Golly, now you'll see how the whole thread fits together. When we were talking about how you're stacking that lead side, those golfers that tilt their spine backwards and the head falls backwards, a little like Scheffler, but he moves really laterally with his lower body. That
Right.
causes some handle dragging as well. So if you're a tilter, you got to start letting the head go a little bit too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So many matchups, folks. You can see a whole lot of stuff on TJ's Instagram account, and you give remote lessons too. Yes.
I do. That's actually probably the majority of the lessons I give these days is remote.
Oh,
So
perfect.
set up a tripod. You can do FaceTime, Zoom, and yeah, it sounds like a blast.
Okay, we'll talk more about that. A couple more things here. There was a very cool drill. Now this fits in with a handle dragging and kind of slinging the club head. And you just said this is good for hand action. And hand action is one of those taboo things where you talk about, rate of closure in the swing, and everyone's like, well, okay. I have my theories and thoughts and stuff there too. But you did a wonderful explanation. So I want you to do it for the screen of just how the hands move and the space in which they move through the swing. Because, folks, the hand action is not absent in the full swing. It just gets to move in a certain area at a certain time. So, why don't you describe and show, please?
Sure. So the video you're referencing, I got enamored with like some Jack Nicklaus stuff really in the past year, right? Like so I'm just kind of watching him, how he goes about his movements. And one thing I noticed he was doing was this like really interesting like waggle that he did before he
Whole
stepped
career.
up to the ball,
Whole career.
right?
He's done that move his entire career. Yeah.
Yeah. So that waggle's really, really cool. I was like, what's he doing there? So he's got, this club head kind of making this little circle as he waggles the club in the golf ball. So it wasn't like a straight back and through waggle. There was like just a little shape to it, right?
Yeah.
So he's kind of looks like he's preparing that club maybe to, attack a little bit more from the inside. Who knows what he's doing? It's probably just a way that he gets loose and free before he hits a ball, right? But I started taking that into, kind of how I'm motoring my own hand action,
Yeah.
right? And kind of trying to mold it after that sort of waggle move. And, it helps me do a couple things, right? Helps me get the club, a little bit more above the plane in the first part of the backswing,
Yeah.
fall a little bit under the plane in transition, and then swing out through it,
Yeah.
right? So it just kind of presets that idea in my mind where if I want to hit a draw, especially, I just kind of waggle that way, right?
Mm.
Like, makes sense?
It certainly does. And for the folks on audio, imagine that TJ had this beautiful black persimmon driver with a red insert in it that he was fiddling with. And his hands weren't moving side to side. He was just making this little rolling movement, and the club head was traveling in a clockwise fashion. So it was kind of going up to 12 o'clock and then kind of making a little circle. There, he's doing it right towards you. That actually looks like a powerbolt driver you got in your hand over there.
Yeah, it is.
That's got this. I recognize the soul. Um,
Yeah.
so it's just this little move, and if you go and search Jack Nicklaus, you'll see it. He stands over the ball, just basically moves his feet a little bit, and there's these tiny little movements that are really just done with the wrists. Where Hogan was more staccato, and he'd kind of hinge the wrist and flick the club head. This is almost a little round kind of action. And I love it too because when you're doing this, you never can really hyper extend this wrist at all. You're always going a little bit more in the neutral kind of fashion, which Nicholas spoke about in Golf My Way too. Okay, great stuff. There's one more. You talked about losing and gaining space. Um, we've talked about pressure shifts. You did a drill, and I'm a big one for drilling where you can really get the feel of it. And this feel you showed, you had one of those halfway Bosu balls in the gym. And
Hmm,
we were talking about skiing down the hill and then jumping off the ramp. I feel like this
right.
is almost the perfect one. If you've got a club in your hand and you can, at home, wherever, you can do this. So describe the feeling because you actually had your foot up on the ball and it's like you leant on that thing and pushed away. And so the club just accelerated past you. And I'm like, this is so cool. I've got to talk about it and allow you to talk about it too.
Cool. Yeah, that Bosu ball drill is cool. To me, it kind of helped me feel. It obviously exaggerates some of the elements, but it helped me feel how I can kind of push off the ground a little bit to be able to speed the club head up through the hitting area,
Yeah.
right? So the drill you're kind of describing, right? I get this left foot up on top of the Bosu ball, and as I start to load down in transition and stack the joints, I'm pressing fairly aggressively into that Bosu ball.
Yeah.
But then as I come through the ball here and I release the club, I'm trying to feel as if my kind of upper centers is what I call them. So the chest and the head, I'm trying to feel as if those can actually be allowed to move slightly back away from the target again,
Mm-hmm.
which is a way to speed the club head up and sort of counterbalance it. So a lot of people, when they're trying to swing really, really fast, they can't because they don't know how to counterbalance the weight of the club moving out away from them.
Yeah.
So if I'm swinging this thing really hard and I just go with it forever, then I can't actually maintain that level of speed for very long.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can get myself sort of feeling like I move back away from that ball, I can really sling energy out of the club, yet still be balanced in the way I do it. So that's kind of where that drill came from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a super drill, people, because, and this touches on the handle dragging thing. If you got your foot on that halfway ball in front of you and you lean on it, then push away, you'll feel how the head wants to swing around you. You certainly
Mm,
won't. You're going to pull on the handle if you're not pushing away from the thing. So I just thought
correct.
it was a neat way because we battle, and this is where I love your concepts and your information, but you make it tangible where people can create a feel too. And some of these feels, TJ, are just so foreign. Your little friend is
Yes.
greeting us there, or two of them.
Yeah, two of
Oh, beautiful,
them.
handsome boys. Um, and this feel, I'm sure, may feel foreign to people because all of them are like, oh, I can't be lifting my head. But this is how the really elite golfers honestly generate speed.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes I just think that people need a way of like breaking open their current conceptual framework so
Yeah.
that they can feel something new.
Mm.
A lot of people are really rooted in, well, I have to do it this way and this way and this way and this way. They don't give themselves permission to like explore the feeling. And that's kind of what I feel like I do well is I explore all ranges of motion so I can help whoever's there. You know what I mean?
Well, you certainly do, and it's what attracted me to you. And you mentioned the name Scotty Scheffler, and this is a guy. I mean, if you look through history at all the great golfers, they all, understand the concepts, and then they make the concepts personal, and they understand
Mm,
what they can do to just respect the concepts, and in the end, land the club at the right place, pointing in the right direction with the right amount of speed, and that's what we were
mm.
talking about today. So I pretty much guarantee if folks do what you're saying they will flush more golf shots. It'll also help them if they reach out to you for a lesson. So why don't you direct them to your social media and where they can find you for virtual lessons, please?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the social media handle earlier. That's at TJK Golf
Mhm.
17. Shoot me a message on there if you want to get linked up for a virtual lesson. Just DM me. I respond to those pretty frequently, and you can also go to the Elite Golf School's website, which is elitegolfofaz.com.
Mhm.
Um, But yeah, I'd love to work with you.
You guys are doing great golf out there, great stuff out there, and I love how you're taking the scientific and the technological, and you're making it simple to understand and even simpler and easier to apply. And that's really what I appreciate, because for me, the knowledge is one thing, but wisdom to apply it and make it personal is another. And I appreciate you joining me, and I appreciate what you and Riley and all you guys are doing, because you're doing a fantastic job of that.
I appreciate you having me on, Mark. I've watched your podcast a lot. This is really, really cool. So thank you.
My pleasure. I'm so glad you would join us.